My name is Naomi Reed. I'm 52 years old. I've worked at Helix Point Systems for almost 3 decades, long enough to know every breath this building takes, every distinct echo on the concrete floors, and the way each department's mood shifts whenever a major system update rolls out. I'm not the kind of person who enjoys standing in front of a crowd or taking praise. I'm the one who arrives first, leaves last, and makes sure the systems Chicago relies on never fail when the city needs them most. That morning began like hundreds before it. I walked into the office at 6:30 while the city was still waking up. The elevated train screeched by with that familiar metallic cry I've heard all my life. I poured myself a cup of black coffee in the tiny break room and headed to the 7th floor, home of the Sentinel Rail Operations Center. That contract was the heart of my final months here, $86 million dollars to deploy a safety control system for the smart subway line. The interface might look sleek, but the real value was in the invisible layers we guarded line by line. I powered up the system and logged in with the highest clearance I've held for over a decade. AnchorGate appeared on screen, the security protocol I designed after a near disaster years ago. Final confirmation pending glowed in the corner, right above a small note only I understood. I set my hands on the keyboard and opened the simulation panel for one last check. I truly believed that morning would be just another normal day. I thought I'd get through the work, close my final login at 5 in the afternoon, and walk out of Helix Point for the last time. I even had a small plan for the evening: a light dinner, a glass of wine, a quiet night to breathe after 27 years of never really resting. But at 8:12, everything shifted because of one simple sound: a new email notification. I glanced at the corner of the screen. The sender, Daniel Locke, CEO. The subject line, Sentinel Project Personnel. Update. No greeting, no urgency, just a title as dry as a technical memo. I opened it. 4 sentences. The email informed me I was being removed from the project effective immediately. All operational control and access rights were being transferred to Tessa Locke, newly appointed that very morning. The change took effect the moment the email arrived. I read it twice, then a third time. Still the same. No explanation. No thank you for 27 years of carrying weight most people never saw. No polite HR message wishing me a smooth retirement. Not even a courtesy phone call. I was erased with an email. I sat still for a moment. The feeling wasn't shock. It was like someone quietly shut a door behind me while I was still standing in the doorway. Sudden, cold, with no one to look in the eye and ask a single honest question: why? I stood and walked down the hall. A few engineers passed by. They looked at me, then quickly looked away. Someone picked up their phone and pretended to be busy. No one said a word. That silence was louder than any congratulations or apologies. They knew. They just didn't dare step near it. I didn't blame them. I've lived in this world too long to believe loyalty ever wins against fear. Back at my desk, my coffee was still steaming. Anchor Gate was still open, final confirmation pending, waiting for my voice. The voice print only I could complete. That protocol recognized me from the very first command because it was built from my instincts, my mistakes, my years of patching holes other people left behind. And I understood something with absolute clarity. Helix Point could replace me with an email, but AnchorGate did not take orders that easily. It listened to only one voice, mine. I exhaled slowly. Part of me hurt. Another part sharpened with a calm only the coldest cuts ever bring. No screaming, no theatrics, no grand confrontation, just a clean slice, and I was pushed aside. Except the truth is never that clean. And I knew there was still one thread woven into the entire system they could never touch. I closed the email, sat still for a few more seconds, and felt something strange. Maybe this wasn't an ending at all. Maybe the real story was only beginning. And if you're hearing this, you probably know that kind of office silence, the kind that squeezes the air out of the room. Where are you listening from? Leave a line below. If you like stories where quiet moments cut sharper than any showdown, don't forget to follow. I promise. The part that comes next has more layers than you think. I returned to my desk, everything so familiar it almost hurt. The glass lunch container I always brought from home, the ceramic coffee mug with the Chicago Running Club logo, and the corner where I kept a family photo taken 8 years ago on our trip to the Grand Canyon. Each small thing is tied to a chapter of my life at Helix Point. 27 years, reduced to a handful of quiet objects sitting on a desk, as if they too had just heard I had been replaced and did not know how to react. I opened the bottom drawer, the one where I kept odds and ends. A few dried out pens, a small bag of cashews, and 2 notebooks filled with scribbles only I could decipher. I placed everything into a simple tote bag. I did not want to bring much, partly because I refused to look like someone who had just been pushed out, partly because the space no longer felt like mine. When I was about to leave, my eyes drifted to the nameplate on the glass door. Naomi Reed, Systems Director, Sentinel Rail, was gone. In its place was a new plate, shiny and perfectly straight, not even touched by dust. Tessa Locke, Program Director, Sentinel. No trace that this had ever been my office. Installed quickly, almost surgically, like someone wanted to erase the past in a single morning. I froze, not out of anger, but because the replacement was too fast, too precise, clearly prepared ahead of time. I drew a slow breath and walked back to the control terminal to log in one last time with the admin clearance I had held for nearly a decade. The system interface lit up, a landscape I knew by heart. I opened every folder, every file, carefully. Personal notes, instructions I wrote for the younger engineers, the first sketches of AnchorGAT EE, back when it was only an idea. I deleted them all. Not out of spite, but because I did not want anything misinterpreted or used in a way that betrayed what I built. I did not touch a single project file, not one line of code, not one audit log. Everything belonging to Sentinel stayed exactly where it should. The work was never mine to take. I opened AnchorGate again. That protocol was one of the things I was proudest of. I began writing the first lines of it after an incident I still remember too clearly. 3 years ago, a senior manager had tried to tweak a few phrases in a partner contract to make quarterly revenue look better. Just a few harmless-looking lines, but they shifted the legal liability between both parties. If those edits slipped through, Helix Point would have carried catastrophic risk. I caught it by accident because a system log ran at the wrong time. I reported it to the old board. They panicked just enough to grasp the danger. Out of that mess, I proposed AnchorGate, a protocol that refused to accept any final change unless the responsible lead confirmed it with their voice. The board approved it formally, with one condition. The protocol had to be tied to my workstation, my old office, and a voice file I recorded in our internal studio. 3 layers of protection, so no one else could activate it. A safeguard I designed to protect the project from human error. Now it was the only thing left in the building that still carried my imprint. I logged out, pulled my security badge from the reader, and stepped into the hallway. 2 mid-level managers stood near the common area. They looked at me, regret mixed with unease. One opened his mouth as if to speak, then thought better of it. I understood. In this place, standing by me meant putting yourself in the CEO line of fire. They chose silence, like everyone else today. My phone buzzed. Another email from Daniel. A thank you note. A single paragraph sent from the company's auto message system, identical to the ones they used during last year's mass layoffs. Nothing personal, no respect, just a checkbox after 27 years. I did not reply. I stepped into the elevator, rode down to the lobby, and walked out. Chicago's midday air was crisp and cold. I stood on the sidewalk and looked up at the Helix Point Tower, the place I had given nearly half my life to. The giant logo on the corner still shone bright, but something inside me had shifted permanently. I was not angry anymore, just a soft, deep ache paired with a clarity sharp as clean glass. This place was no longer mine, and as I turned away, I realized something else. I had just stepped out of a door that had been locked for a long time. I was simply the last one to notice. I spent 2 days at home trying to get used to the idea that I had officially left Helix Point. In the mornings, I ran along the river, then stopped at a small cafe near Lincoln Park, where no one knew who I was or cared about the internal politics of a tech company. I brewed more coffee at home, tried to clear my head. I reorganized my closet, cleaned the kitchen, and opened a book I had bought 3 months earlier but never found the time to read. I told myself maybe I should treat it like an early retirement by a few days. But when my phone kept buzzing on the kitchen counter, I knew I could not pretend the outside world had stopped. I did not plan to open any of those notifications. I even flipped the phone face down, then shoved it into a drawer. But the silence of it was worse than the noise. Eventually, I turned the screen on, and within seconds, I understood exactly what was happening. Tessa was everywhere. A major Chicago tech outlet posted the first article, talking about a wave of young leaders taking over new infrastructure projects. LinkedIn was filled with photos of her in a brand new suit, standing beside a miniature Sentinel train model. A city finance blog analyzed her potential to bring fresh thinking to Helix Point's leadership. A podcast on urban technology released a trailer where her confident voice introduced the project's new direction. I sat at the dining table scrolling through each post. They all used the same phrase. The young face leading Sentinel Rail. They wrote as if the entire project had only begun the moment she walked into the office, and everything before that was just a faded footnote in company history. I was not angry. What I felt was a kind of emptiness I could not quite describe. Something sad, something oddly light, like watching myself from outside my own life while someone rewrote it neatly and cleanly. I opened a video interview. Tessa sat in a familiar studio chair, lights aimed at a face polished by makeup. When she was asked how she improved Sentinel's final confirmation process, she started with a perfectly crafted line. Our mission is to optimize seamless operations for the future of urban user experience. I knew instantly she did not understand the question. Then came the explanations. She mispronounced Sentinel as Sentinel twice. She described a central control interface that the system did not have. She referred to AnchorGate as a simple checkpoint instead of the three-layer security protocol that took me nearly 5 months to write and test line by line. I turned the video off before it ended, not because I could not stand it, but if I kept watching, I would feel bad for her and for myself. That afternoon, a former manager of mine sent me a message. Just one line. You will want to see this. Attached was a photo, my old desk, the dark wooden one I had sat at for more than a decade, and Tessa is sitting there, smiling into the camera for a PR shoot. My old coffee mug, the one I left behind thinking no one would ever need it, was positioned neatly beside her like a carefully chosen real-life prop. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the photo for a long time. Something in me tightened and loosened at the same time. Not anger. More like watching a stranger walk into your home, put on your coat, and post a picture online as if everything belonged to them. I knew not everyone inside Helix Point agreed with the PR push. A young engineer messaged me privately. She said they had been told to like and share Tessa's post to boost engagement. Some objected, but eventually gave in because they did not want to seem unsupportive of the team. I thanked her and told her not to worry about me. Everyone has their own place to stand in these kinds of chess games. That evening, I opened a behind-the-scenes video Helix Point uploaded. I almost did not watch, but my finger clicked anyway. In the short clip, Tessa stood behind the camera, waiting for the interview to start. The tech crew adjusted her mic and lights. She smiled, but her hands were shaking. I did not know if anyone else would notice, but I did. When a young engineer told her everything was ready, she whispered something quietly, afraid of her own voice. Do you think I can do this? Before I could think, the studio door opened. Daniel walked in. Instantly, Tessa straightened her back, lifted her chin, and fixed her posture. Her smile returned to the exact shape the PR team needed. The moment of trembling disappeared like it had never happened. I closed the video, this time, not out of discomfort, but because of something more tangled. I did not like how she was placed in that seat, but I understood the weight of expectations on someone young, especially when the chair was never meant for them. As I was about to wash the dishes, my phone lit up again with a new email. I looked at the sender and felt my heartbeat slow. From Adrian Cole, Horizon Metro Infrastructure. Only a few sentences, but enough to make the room go quiet. We were informed you left the Sentinel project. I thought we still had a final review session this week. What exactly is happening over there at Helix Point? I sat down, read the email again. Then once more. I did not reply. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I knew from this moment on, every word I wrote could change the direction of a story they believed they had already controlled. I set the phone on the table, silent. I knew I could not stay quiet for much longer. 3 days after I left the company, the final contract activation at Helix Point took place at 8 in the morning in the large 8th floor conference room. That room used to be where I led almost every critical review, the kind of place where the sound of the glass door closing meant the work had already begun. Today, the person in the center seat was Tessa. The room was bright and tense in a way I had never seen. Daniel stood at the head of the table, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Tessa sat in the middle with her laptop open to the Sentinel interface. The engineering teams lined both sides of the table, a mix of people who had worked with me for years and a few new faces. Among them, Kayla, the young engineer I once mentored, sat upright and watchful. Tessa pulled the microphone closer and opened the anchor gate window. I could picture it clearly because I had written every line of logic behind that interface. She glanced at Daniel, took a breath, and pressed the command. Authorize final confirmation. The system processed it for a few seconds. Then the screen flashed a red notification. Environment mismatch. Origin device required. The entire room froze. Kayla frowned, but stayed silent. Daniel stared at Tessa as if she had missed something obvious. Tessa tried again, quicker and harder this time. Environment mismatch. Origin device required. Tessa clenched her jaw. Maybe the connection is unstable, or my machine is glitching. Kayla opened her laptop and pulled up the system logs. She read fast, then looked up, her voice calm but firm. It is not your machine. AnchorGate is rejecting the confirmation because the environment does not match. It requires the original device and the registered voice. That person is Naomi. Daniel snapped toward Kayla. Are you telling me the entire system is locked by a former employee? That does not make sense, Kayla answered, steady, like someone who knew exactly what she was talking about. It is not locked. It is following the process approved by the previous board. The final layer only accepts Naomi's voice through the origin device at the encoded location. An older engineer tried to ease the tension. We can simulate the environment, use a secondary server to fool AnchorGate. It is just a technical problem. Kayla turned to him. If we do that, we break the integrity of the protocol. Horizon can initiate an audit. If they find an unauthorized patch, the system can be suspended under federal regulations. Daniel tapped the table sharply. I do not care about those details. I need a solution. Whether it is a temporary patch, an override, or rolling back to an older version, I do not care. We will not let an outdated process and a former employee dictate the future of this company. That line hit the room like a weight. I could imagine Kayla's expression. Half disbelief, half disappointment. A small group of engineers immediately sided with Daniel. They opened their laptops and whispered quick technical options. Words like environment emulation, signal layering, and temporary bypass scattered through the air. The rest, including Kayla and two younger engineers, held their ground. One of them spoke plainly. If we break AnchorGate, we violate the Federal Security Appendix. This is not a technical error, it is a process violation. The designer of the protocol warned about this from day one. Daniel cut in. She does not work here anymore. Kayla met his stare. But the protocol still does. Tessa was unraveling now. She kept touching her hair, glancing at Daniel for reassurance. After several seconds of silence, Daniel issued the order. Tessa, try again. Use the external microphone and read the full command. Tessa switched mics, forcing her voice to sound confident. Confirm Sentinel, final authorization. The screen flashed the same red alert, this time with an additional error code. Environment mismatch. Origin device required. Voice pattern invalid. Silence swallowed the entire room. A young engineer drew a breath as if to speak, then thought better of it. At that moment, Daniel's phone vibrated repeatedly. An email from Horizon had arrived. He skimmed it, his face tightening. Horizon is demanding an activation status update before the end of the day. If not, They will pause the process. A PR staffer waiting outside rushed in. Daniel leaned in as she whispered something. Then he nodded sharply, voice cold. Build a narrative about signal interference. Do not mention Anchorgate. She ran out immediately. Tessa looked around the room, pretending to stay composed, though her hands still trembled. She told Daniel with forced confidence, "We just need more time. I will handle it." But anyone with actual expertise knew the truth. The system was not giving them any more chances. Kayla closed her laptop and placed both hands on the table as if grounding herself. "We cannot override Anchorgate. It was designed to stop exactly the kind of interference you are asking for." Daniel stared at her with a cold, simmering hostility. "Then find a way to make it accept." Kayla answered slowly. "The only way is to use the original device, in the original location, with Naomi's voice." Tessa sat completely still. Daniel turned away, unable to acknowledge the truth staring him in the face. For the first time since they removed me from the project, they understood something. Some protocols are not built to keep outside threats away. Some are built to stop reckless decisions from within the company itself. And today, Anchorgate was doing that job perfectly. The next morning, I left the house a little after 6. The Chicago sky was still washed in mist, the air cool and damp in a way that made my mind feel clearer. I ran along the familiar river path, trying not to drift back to what had happened at Helix Point, but the watch on my wrist buzzed 3 times. Email. I stopped by the steel railing and looked down at the water. I opened my inbox, and the sender appeared immediately. Adrian Cole, Horizon Metro Infrastructure. The email was long, very unlike his usual concise messages. Adrian was always direct, unmistakably clear about his position. But this time, every sentence was careful, polite to the point of sounding cold. He wrote that the final version of the contract Helix Point sent yesterday had unusual edits. The timestamp was off by 7 minutes from the locked version. Some clauses in the legal liability section, which had been immutable, now showed small but significant changes. He ended with a line that made me pause for a long moment. "We are reviewing the entire log. I am not sure what is happening at Helix Point, but someone touched the contract after the final review with you." I read it once, then again. No anger, no accusation. But every line carried the same warning. Horizon had sensed something was wrong. I waited a moment and replied with one short, precise, completely neutral sentence. "I am no longer on the project, but please review the Anchor Gate appendix on page 27. I sent it and kept running. With every step on the pavement, I knew things had moved to a new level, and more importantly, I still had not intervened in anything. I only answered the question I had been asked. Exactly 1 hour later, while I was making coffee in the kitchen, Adrian called. The phone buzzed once, long and steady. I picked up. "Naomi, I just read the appendix. Can you explain further?" I leaned against the counter, keeping my voice even. "I cannot explain on Helix Point's behalf, but that appendix makes it clear that any final modification must be confirmed through Anchorgate. Without that confirmation, the contract is not valid." He was silent for a few seconds. "We checked the metadata," Adrian said. "There are traces of edits from Helix Point at 2 in the morning. That does not match the work history between both sides. Let me ask this plainly. Did you make those changes?" I answered just as plainly. "No. I lost access 3 days ago." A long pause. I heard him exhale, quietly, but with frustration. Then Helix Point sent us a modified document after finalization. "This is serious, Naomi." I remained silent. I was not going to say anything beyond my responsibility. Adrian continued, "We are opening every system log. I want you to know that Helix Point does not shift the blame onto you." I answered simply, "I understand, and you are doing the right thing." The call ended, but I knew that from Horizon's side, the storm had already begun. Meanwhile, at Helix Point, an emergency meeting was taking place. I was not there, but the people who remained told me enough for me to picture it clearly. The room was thick with tension. The in-house attorney presented first, urgent but controlled. She projected the appendix I knew by heart onto the screen, modifying the contract after review. That was the phrase she emphasized. And that was exactly what Horizon had detected. She stated it plainly. Altering a finalized contract without reconfirmation through Anchor Gate is a violation. By law, even a minor change in the liability section can void the entire agreement. Tessa sat quietly, her back slightly hunched. Daniel spoke through gritted teeth. This is just a system bug. Incorrect metadata is nothing new. Kayla stood. It is not a bug. We created an export after hours. It does not match Horizon's log. They will check everything. Daniel waved her off. I said this already. This is a formatting error. We just need a reasonable explanation. No one at Horizon wants to escalate this. A senior engineer finally spoke up, voice trembling. But Horizon already requested the full Anchor Gate log. If they compare their version to ours, the edits will show. Daniel glared. Send them the correct log. Adjust the rest to match. The attorney cut in, voice sharp as ice. If we alter the logs, that is no longer a technical correction. That is evidence tampering. I will not sign off on any action like that. Silence dropped across the room. Tessa looked at Daniel for direction, but this time he said nothing. He only straightened up and forced his voice into a calm he did not have. Horizon will understand this is just an issue, nothing serious. But at that moment, the shared inbox chimed. A new email, its subject glaring across the LED screen. Official notice. Contract activation suspended. Horizon Metro infrastructure. Daniel pulled the laptop closer and skimmed it. Everyone watched. They were demanding a full system audit, including Anchor Gate. Kayla sat down, exhausted. The email was short, but the final line cut the deepest. Until the audit is complete, all access and all activation procedures are considered frozen. No one spoke. No one stood. No one could believe that the morning had begun only minutes earlier with a simple click. And somewhere else in the city, I stood by my apartment window, watching the people moving along the street below. I did not need to do anything. The truth was finding its own way. 3 days after the Horizons audit notice, I received a thick envelope delivered to my doorstep. The courier looked at me with a curious glance, as if he could sense something important inside the rigid paper. I signed, closed the door, and placed the envelope on the kitchen table. The sender was printed in bold in the upper left corner, Brenton and Hale Law Firm. I opened it and read. The letter was nearly 4 pages long, written in the cold, precise voice of attorneys who specialize in corporate disputes. They accused me of establishing unauthorized technical barriers, failing to hand off responsibilities properly, and even creating a risk of delaying a federal contract. At the end, they asked me to cooperate to minimize damage to Helix Point. I let out a short laugh, not amusement. The dry, tired laugh of someone who has witnessed far too many clumsy power plays over 30 years of work. I did not respond immediately. I called Denise Parker. Denise was the attorney I had worked with on a major infrastructure project 8 years ago. Sharp, direct, and frighteningly knowledgeable about tech-related law. People called her the translator of technology in courtrooms, and they were right. If anyone was going to stand between me, Helix Point, and it would be Denise. She picked up after 2 rings. Naomi, I am guessing something not so gentle just happened. I sent her a scan of the letter. 10 seconds later, she burst out laughing. Daniel is trying to shift the blame. This tactic is so old it has dust on it. Meet me this afternoon. We will respond in the language they understand best. Meanwhile, inside Helix Point, things were not as contained as Daniel hoped. One afternoon, Kayla sent me a message with no subject line. Just one sentence. Tessa is being pushed so hard that she is close to breaking. I did not reply. But that evening, as I sat in my reading room, my phone buzzed. A message from Tessa. Naomi, can we talk? I know this has gone too far. I was just following orders. I never wanted to overstep you or take that position. Daniel forced me. I do not know what to do anymore. The message was long, messy, and sent near midnight. I read it, then deleted it. Not out of hatred, but because I knew exactly what was happening. Tessa was reaching for anything that might float when the ship started sinking, and I was not going to be one of those lifelines. The formal meeting between Daniel and me happened 2 days later, at Denise's office downtown. It was a small, warm space with wood-paneled walls and soft yellow lighting, the kind of atmosphere that made even the harshest negotiations feel less violent. Denise liked it that way. She said it made people show their true nature faster. Daniel arrived 8 minutes late. He walked in with a forced, polite smile, an expensive suit doing nothing to hide his exhaustion. He shook Denise's hand, then looked at me. Naomi, thank you for coming. We all want this resolved smoothly. I did not answer. Denise gestured for him to sit, then placed a thin folder on the table. Before you say anything, she began, I want to make 2 points clear. 1, Anchorgate was legally approved by the previous board, with your signature in the appendix. 2, Naomi lost access to the system 3 days before the incident occurred. Daniel stiffened. He clearly did not expect me to arrive with a lawyer who understood the system down to its roots. He pressed his lips together, then shifted into a softer tone. We do not want this to become a conflict. Naomi, you understand how important Sentinel is to the company. We just need your help unlocking Anchorgate. That is all. I am willing to offer a consulting bonus, a number worthy of your contribution. Denise leaned back. You are asking my client to interfere with a federal protocol and wipe audit markers designed to prevent unauthorized edits. That request is not legal. I hope you understand that. Daniel turned to me, searching for sympathy. Naomi. I sat up, my chest steady in a way that even surprised me. Daniel, you sent an email to remove me from the project, erased my name from the internal records, and replaced the nameplate within 8 hours. You placed someone without enough experience in the seat and called it the future. You let someone reenact the work I spent years building as if it had been invented overnight. And now, when everything has collapsed, you want me to fix the consequences. I paused. My voice did not rise, but it cut through the room cleanly. You erased me from history. Do not expect me to rewrite it for you. Daniel fell silent. A heavy, stone-like silence settled over the table. For the first time, he no longer looked like a powerful CEO. He looked like someone who had just realized the board had flipped, and he no longer held the advantage. Denise closed the folder. This meeting is over. From now on, all communication goes through my office. No exceptions. Daniel stood, trying to regain his posture, but his hand tightened into a small fist, the gesture of someone losing and refusing to admit it. He left without another word. The door closed behind him, leaving a warm, dim stillness in the room. I stood, adjusted my coat, feeling as if a long, settled layer of dust had finally been brushed off my shoulders. As I walked down the hallway of the law office, there was no applause, no moment of triumph, only quiet. But it was not the silence of surrender anymore. It was the silence of someone who had finally stepped out of a game she no longer belonged to, carrying the one thing they never expected her to have: control. 3 days after the confrontation at Denise's office, my morning began with the phone vibrating nonstop. I thought it was just personal messages, but when I unlocked the screen, 3 large words appeared on the notification. Chicago Ledger. Exclusive investigation. The Chicago Ledger was no small outlet. It was the most influential financial magazine in the Midwest, known for exposing scandals that even billion-dollar corporations feared. I opened the article. The headline cut like a blade. Helix Point suspected of altering federal contract. Internal push to bypass Anchor Gate security protocol. The article was long, sharply edited, and laid out clearly enough that even someone outside the industry would know this was not a harmless technical hiccup. They quoted leaked emails from inside Helix Point, emails that only someone within the company could have provided. One appeared in the middle of the page. We must bypass Anchor Gate at all costs. Cannot let a former employee delay an $86 million contract. Dash email from Daniel Locke to the Technical Operations Group. I sat still for a few seconds. Those words alone could detonate any pending contract. And the fact that they appeared on the Chicago Ledger meant someone inside Helix Point had lost all trust in Daniel and decided to strike back. The news spread fast. By noon, Twitter and LinkedIn were burning. The comments split into 2 clear camps. The first camp supported me, mostly engineers and security specialists who understood that a system like Anchorgate was not something you bypassed like an apartment firewall. Comments flooded in. I cannot believe a CEO tried to override protocol. Anchorgate exists to prevent this behavior. Shout out to the person who designed this protocol. Without it, the damage would be far worse. The other camp viewed everything through a simpler lens, calling me difficult, procedural, or uncooperative. But that camp shrank quickly, especially when the article revealed more emails, override logs, clean metadata, and reconstruct publication timestamps. This was no debate. It was evidence of deliberate concealment. That afternoon, a message came from Kayla. We saw the article. Most people know the truth now. You were right. You protected the project from going wrong in the first place. I did not reply immediately. Something in that message loosened my chest for a moment, but tightened it too. I had spent years training young engineers like Kayla, teaching them how to judge right and wrong even when the line was thin. They saw it clearly now, but the cost of this lesson was too high for Helix Point. While social media boiled, the Helix Point board was pulled into its biggest internal conflict in years. Those who once backed Daniel split into two directions. One group demanded his temporary suspension for damaging the relationship with Horizon Metro. The other still insisted things could be salvaged with the right explanation. But then a second email leak surfaced online. This time, Daniels' directive was to the entire executive team. Build the narrative around a technical malfunction. No one is allowed to mention Anchorgate. From that moment, I knew Daniel's tenure as CEO had no way out. The breaking point came on Wednesday evening, when Tessa appeared on a Helix Point live stream. She sat in front of a pale blue backdrop, bright lights throwing soft shadows behind her. Clearly, the PR team meant for this to calm the storm. Tessa began confidently, talking about misunderstandings and minor system adjustments the team was working on. But when viewers pushed hard in the live comments, her expression tightened. One comment was pinned right in the middle of the screen. You altered the contract after Naomi left, didn't you? That is a violation. Tessa slipped. Her voice rose a notch. It is not like that. We only adjusted a few tiny details. She bit her lip, realizing she had said too much. But the internet never forgets. Within minutes, the clip was cut, shared, and spreading everywhere. A Twitter account turned it into a meme. Tessa, only a little adjustment. The entire infrastructure sector. A little is enough to lose an $86 million contract. I watched it without knowing whether to laugh or feel sorry. She had been pulled into a game she was never trained to survive. Around 7 in the evening, my phone rang. A former engineer called, voice shaking with anger or sadness. I could not tell which. Naomi, they are blaming you for everything, but we all know you saved the project from going wrong at the start. If the contract activated the wrong clause, Horizon would sue. We know because you taught us. I thanked him and ended the call. No more words. I did not want to hear anything else. Close to 9, Horizon Metro released an official statement. I opened their website. The first line was unmistakable. Horizon Metro Infrastructure is suspending all collaboration with Helix Point until system audits are complete. Then came a sentence that tightened my chest. We acknowledge the contributions of the former Helix Point technical team, especially those who established the security protocols ensuring contract integrity. They did not name me. They did not have to. Everyone knew. I closed the laptop. The apartment settled into quiet dusk. I should have felt relieved. And part of me was, as if the truth had finally been placed where it belonged. But in my chest, there was still a space. Not anger, not satisfied. The quiet ache of someone who once loved a place, spent half her life building it, only to watch it collapse under its own mistakes. I sat for a long time, listening to the cars outside. The day Helix Point began to fall apart, I felt neither joy nor regret, only exhaustion. And in that exhaustion, I knew I had left at the right moment. The news of Horizon terminating the contract came early in the morning, just as I was setting the kettle on the stove. My phone flashed a breaking alert, then another, then 2 more financial outlets reposted it. I did not need to open them to know what it was, but I tapped the screen anyway. A press release from Horizon Metro filled the white display, sharp and clean. Horizon Metro Infrastructure officially terminates the $86 million contract with Helix Point Systems, effective immediately. Right below it, the reason was stated plainly. We have lost confidence in Helix Point's leadership transition and in the integrity of the technical infrastructure related to the Sentinel project. Unauthorized alterations to contract documentation are unacceptable. No softening, no ambiguity, just the truth laid out like a polished blade. I stood still in the kitchen, steam rising from the kettle. What rose in me was not joy. It was the quiet acceptance of someone who had long known this moment was inevitable, simply waiting for it to be written down. Within 2 hours of the announcement, Helix Points' stock plunged. Every major financial site live streamed the fall. Comments scrolled in real time, investors panicking, analysts predicting the scandal's impact across the sector. Online debates trying to assign blame. A trending headline dominated the public finance forum. Helix Point loses $86 million over a forgotten security protocol. Those who understood knew the truth. Anchorgate was not the problem. The problem was Helix Point trying to bypass it. By noon, the Helix Point board convened an emergency meeting. By 3, the press reported that Daniel Locke had been suspended as CEO. By evening, an internal source confirmed he had been forced out entirely, without severance. During a brief interview in the lobby, Daniel repeated only one line: "This is a technical misunderstanding." But no one was listening anymore. At the same time, Tessa appeared on the list of temporary leave for mental recovery, a polite way of saying she had been removed from the project. PR tried to salvage her image with stories about the pressure of young leadership, but the public no longer cared. They saw clearly the director and the person caught in the script. That afternoon, as I watered my plants on the balcony, my phone rang. Adrian's name appeared on the screen. I assumed he was calling to formally confirm the end of the contract, but the conversation took an entirely different direction. "Naomi, we reviewed every log, every procedure. You did nothing wrong. In fact, Anchorgate protected us from an illegally altered agreement." I leaned back in the chair. I simply did my part. The system did its part. Adrian paused for a moment. Then he said something that made me sit upright. "Horizon is forming a new infrastructure safety committee to oversee smart metro projects across the city, and we want you as an independent advisor." I closed my eyes for a moment. The offer felt like a wind blowing against the direction I had walked for 30 years. Independent advisor. No internal politics, no corporate games, no being pulled into someone's performance for the public eye. I asked quietly, "Why me?" Adrian answered without hesitation. "Because you understand the system, because you respect it, and because you are not swayed by anything unrelated to the safety of the project." His answer struck at the fear I had carried for days. The fear of returning to the same toxic cycle of meetings, unreasonable demands, and people like Daniel who treated infrastructure like a stage, not a responsibility. I told him the truth. I do not want to go back to that kind of environment. I do not want to be a tool for any CCO again. Adrian let out a soft laugh. "We do not need someone in front of the camera. We need someone who knows what they are doing," he added, voice steady. "You will work directly with the committee. No PR, no press briefings, no internal system. You can work from home or from your own office. Entirely flexible." I looked down at my hand resting on the chair. The small callus on my thumb, formed from thousands of hours spent reviewing technical documents, was still there. 30 years. How many times had I made decisions that affected the safety of millions without ever being allowed to work on my own terms? I spoke slowly. "I will accept, but I want a fully independent contract," and I set my own schedule. Adrian answered immediately. "You will have full authority. I will send the documents within an hour." The call ended. I walked inside to the living room and opened my laptop. Exactly 40 minutes later, the 12-page agreement arrived in my inbox. I read every line, every clause. No hidden traps, no unfair conditions, nothing remotely resembling Helix Point. Only responsibility and respect. When I signed the digital document, the screen lit up with the words, "Agreement completed, no ceremonial signing, no CEO hovering behind me, no PR celebration, no political pressure. Just me, the quiet desk in my living room, and a contract I chose for myself for the first time in my life." I closed the laptop, leaned back, and exhaled deeply. Not a victory, not revenge, but a new beginning, built with my own hands and my own principles. Something Helix Point had lost long ago, but I never had. 1 week after the contract collapse, I stood at the old train station near River North. Chicago's morning carried that dry cold mixed with the familiar scent of steel. The old line rattled by, wheels scraping against worn tracks. No modern tech, no automation, no polished interfaces. Just an aging train doing its best to run on time and carry people where they needed to go. I watched it for a long moment. Something in the engine noise, the vibration of the rails, felt strange and familiar, like looking at a symbol of the work I spent my whole life protecting. Systems that did not need to be flashy, only honest and steady. My phone vibrated gently. A news alert appeared. Helix Point appoints new CEO. Launches training initiative on respecting internal knowledge and restructures leadership transition protocols. I skimmed the lines. I was not surprised. When a company hits the bottom in public trust, it often returns to the values it neglected for too long. A small part of me wished this had happened earlier, when things could still be saved. But most of me knew the truth. No collapse ever comes from a single cause. It is the accumulation of decisions gone wrong for far too long. I locked the phone. The train kept running. Life kept moving. That afternoon, I received a series of emails from former colleagues, the same people who once stayed silent while I was replaced by a 4-sentence message. Their emails all sounded nearly identical, as if written from the same template. Sorry for not speaking up. We knew what they did to you was wrong. We just did not have the courage then. I read each message slowly. I felt no anger, no resentment. But I also did not feel the relief they were hoping for. I replied simply, "Thank you for your message. I hope you continue to stand by what is right in your work. No blame. No revisiting the past. Not everyone gets to choose truth when truth is still fragile." 2 days later, I stepped into my new role. Not the glossy Helix Point boardroom, not a room with a corporate logo behind me, but a small conference room at Horizon. Wooden table, whiteboard, and a few laptops displaying the new Metro line designs. When I walked in, the engineering team rose to greet me. "Welcome, Advisor Reed." Hearing those two words made something inside me settle. Not pride, not embarrassment. Just the feeling of being called by the right title, without politics twisting it, without anyone trying to erase me from the system. Throughout the meeting, they asked for my input at every step. No one cut in with a PR angle. No one insisted on doing things for optics. No unreasonable pressure. Only people who genuinely wanted to do things right. A young engineer raised her hand. "If the entire auxiliary network fails, which layer should the anchor verification prioritize?" I answered immediately, calm and certain. They wrote down every word, not because I was replacing anyone, but because I understood the system from the inside. The meeting ended. After 2 hours, Adrian shook my hand. "We would like to invite you to speak at next month's System Safety Workshop. Not press, not publicity, just real knowledge sharing." I raised an eyebrow. "I thought you already had enough big names." He smiled. "Names, yes, but very few people actually understand how these systems work." I nodded. The invitation felt like a new path opening. Quiet, steady, intentional. That evening, at home, I brewed chamomile tea and sat by the window. The city lights shimmered below. On the desk corner, my laptop still had the old email open. The termination message. 4 short sentences, no farewell, not even a proper signature. A notification written as if I had never existed. I opened it one last time. 4 lines appeared, as empty and careless as the first day I read them. I placed my hands on the keyboard, wondering for a second if I should respond with something sharp and definitive, the kind of message people dream of sending in moments like this. A cutting line, a final blow. Then I realized I had nothing left to prove. I pressed delete. The email disappeared from my inbox as if it had never been written. I leaned back, took a slow sip of tea, letting the warmth settle in my throat, and I thought to myself, they once believed I would answer with a powerful message. But sometimes the most powerful answer is letting the system and the truth speak on your behalf. I looked out the window. The train station lights still glowed. People kept moving. And me. I was no longer standing outside my own life. I had stepped into a new chapter, and for the first time in a long time, the future did not feel like something to fear. It felt like something to choose.